Today's daf is daf Pei Zayin. Pei Zayin. We're right in the middle of the page. We're Boyi Minei Rava Merabba. Rava asked Rabba a question. The question is as follows. So we're learning the whole time over here about things that are remaining on the Mizbeach. He puts it back up, and so on. If it's a kosher thing, if it's disqualified, if it's possible, you don't put it back up. So boy mine Rabba. Rabba asked Rabba a question. Lina my Ellis Beroisha Shemizbech, I ain't my Ellis Beroisha Shemizbech. We know that if something remains on the ground past its expiry, they know it's till the morning, it becomes then nicer and it becomes possible. What happens if it was sitting on the fire, burned through, then no problem. What happens if it was sitting on the mizbeach, but not on the fire, in the end, somewhere else on the mizbeach, not where the big fires were? Does the mizbeach protect it that he should not become possible as nicer or not? Lina, my elas bereisha shemizbeach, I ain't a shemizbeach. So what are we talking about? Was still sitting there on the mizbeach. What's the problem? We learned that's something which is already possible. If you put it on mizbeach, lo yerdu. So if this chatzchil is sitting on mizbeach, of course you should leave it there. You told us to lo yerdu is bereisha shel mizbeach. It's already sitting on mizbeach. My boy, what's your question? Should you take it down? Why leave it there? The question is the yerdu. You took it down. It was on the mizbeach. And then you removed it. How do we treat it? Do we say that l'shulchan medaminale? Do we compare it to the shulchan? We know that the lechem hapanim you have to be in Shabbos, but if let's say you prepare on Shabbos, and 7 days later, next Shabbos, you take off the levina, you mark it, and so on, then you have lechem hapanim. What happens if you did the levina on a Sunday? You cannot then the following Shabbos take the levina and put him as bad because you need 7 days. So what you do is you wait till the following Shabbos. The lechem hapanim now will be sitting there 13 days. When it comes to shulchan, it doesn't matter how long it's there for, because kolman the bread is on the shulchan, it doesn't matter. So the same thing over here on the mizbeach. Do we say that since it was sitting on the mizbeach when it came over in the shachar, there's no lina? So even though you took it off afterwards, you can put it back on. So the shulchan the minute now we learned afilei no shulchan yamarabi may become no problem. Or maybe it's sitting on the mizbeach, it's just sitting on the floor, which is comes a lina. It's possible. Not allowed to put it on. Sorry. Amalei ein lina bereisha shemizbeach. So basically, Rava asked Rabba a shaila here is that if it was sitting on the mizbeach, not by the fire, if you had some parts of a carbon on the mizbeach itself, and it went through Amud Shachar, so it's already nicer. But because it's sitting on the mizbeach, it therefore does not become nicer? The mizbeach protects it, or do you say the mizbeach is no different than the floor? Because it's not by the fire; it's sitting on another part of the mizbeach, the rosh mizbeach, and therefore,
no
shiloh, burnt up is no question. It's not in what the fire didn't touch; it wasn't even near the fire. Another side of the mizbeach. The fire's on one corner near the miter side. This is on another side.
No, I'm talking the side thing. But does the Bible mention kapara?
Yeah, because I'm akif. The evodim and pedaya and all these things are not akif if it's on top. If it wasn't burnt. Once you did the zrika. You did your kapot already. These rest are mitzvahs. No. These are all mitzvahs. Yeah, but it's not ma'akiv. That's a mitzvah. Ma'akiv is only the avodas till the zika. Once the zika took place, he did a kosher. After that, it's all a mitzvah, not ma'akiv. So, question is kibbutz elay. So Rabba told Rabba it's like the floor, and therefore that even though it's sitting on the mizbeach, Rabba said to Rabba, there's no since it's sitting on the mizbeach, it does not become nicer. It does not become nicer. Nobody treats it like the shulchan. So the question is kibbutz elay here. Did the Rabba accept what Rabba told him or not? Touch for coming here. Eat what we learned. Evarim shalanu ba'azara. Evarim pezayin in the bottom. Evarim shalanu ba'azara. You have evarim that was lying there on the zara on the floor. Is mekatev you have a whole night long to pick it up from the floor and put it on the mizbech. Tell him with the shachar, you can anytime pick it up, put it on the mizbech. Lon bereishes mizbech, clear. It was lying there at the end of the mizbech, not by the fires. Is mekatev that once it's there, it can stay there forever. Yeah, because the Mizbeach protects. What about Yardu? What about you took it down? It was on the Mizbeach after Mudah Shachar, and then you took it down. Did it become puzzle sitting on the Mizbeach not near the fire? Is Rabba says Yalu. It did not become noises, so that you can put it back up. And the Rabba says Lo Yalu. Rabba says no, you cannot put it back up because the Mizbeach is like the floor. That part, if it was not in the fire, it's like sitting on the floor and became noises. Shmamino like Kibbutz Shmamino. Rabba did not accept what Rabba told him. So the Gemara we had in the Mishnah Kashem, so we said the Mishnah just like it was Mekadesh, so to the Kevesh and the ramp also is Mekadesh. And so we want to know, how do you know that? And then we also said that Klei Shaddai is also Mekadesh. So we learned. Hanegem is Mezbeach. If you touch the Mezbeach itself, it becomes Kevesh Menayin. How do you know that the ramp also has all the same dinim? It says in the pasuk Es HaMizbeach. It says V'Kidashta Es HaMizbeach. So Es means what's tuffle. That's what the kevish, the ramp itself. Klei Shaddai Menayin. How do you know Klei Shaddai as well? It says in the pasuk Kol Hanegea Behem. You just talking about Klei Shaddai there, and it says anything that touches it. And we'll see later. What does mean touching means going inside the keli. Becomes Kaddish. So the Klei Shaddai is Mekadesh, the Kevesh is Mekadesh, and Mizbeach Mekadesh. We actually had an opinion, the Gemara of Yehuda a long time ago, that said that the Ritzpah, the floor of the base of the Azor itself, also is Mekadesh. Boy, that's a question. Let's talk about Klei Shaddai. Klei Shaddai is Mawashi Kachu is absolutely that if you put possible parts of a carbon into a Klei Shaddai, let's say a mincha that became tummy, and you put in the Klei Shaddai, it became Kaddish. So the question is, and this is how Rabbi Yochanan understood the Reish Lakish's question: do we say that it became a kedushas haguf, the keli is mekadosh, and now that it's possible, you cannot be paid, you cannot redeem it, you just got to burn it? Or do we say that it's only Kedushas Damim? It only makes it Kaddish as far as the value of the mincha is Kaddish, because it's possible, it came Tamid, for example, and therefore you can be paid it. Paid it with money, and with money you buy new mincha. That's the question. Did the Keli Mekadosh a Kedushas Aguf, even though it was possible, and therefore you cannot be paid or not? So we learned it. It says Mishnah, just like they Mekadesh as a role and Kach Kalim. So Kalim also Mekadesh, whatever wrote Mekadesh. So therefore, this is a carbon, it's in the Klei Shaddai, it becomes a Kedusha Laguf. So the Gemara, my question is something else. I'm not talking about regarding opinion. My question is that whether if it was possible and it went into, let's say, Klei Shaddai, can you go ahead, let's say it was dam, and you put it into the Klei Shaddai, can you go ahead and be zoidik with it or not? I mean, once you put it in the Mizbeach, or once it's there, we say it's all right, but can you now go the next step and be zoidik the dam, for example? Or not? Can you be makibit? Put on Mizbeach from the Klei Shaddai. So Rabbi Yochanan said, Mishnah. We just learned it. The Mishnah says, and this is how Rabbi Yochanan said the Mishnah. That if a apostle, let's say a Zor, a Yisrael, was mekabel the blood, which is possible. He's not. These four avodas, except the shchita. The three avodas are meant to be done by a kohen, and the Yisrael took it. And then it says v'zorkas domei, and he sprinkled the blood. So Rabbi Yochanan understood the Mishnah is telling us the same person did both. Why do you have to say he did both? If the moment he picked up the Klei Shaddai, it already became everything became puzzle. So what's inside is puzzle. Then obviously, it doesn't matter who sprinkles the blood. Why does it have to be he who sprinkles the blood? Someone else, it's still no good. You can now do it.
So the top of the dam is not allowed to do that.
But this is what happened. Matthias. So the fact that the Mishnah says that when is it a problem only if he was Makabal Adam, which is in the Klei Shaddai, but that in itself would have made it good. You could have a kosher person would be able to zoidik the dam. The problem here is that this same or another possible person took it and was zoidik the dam. So clearly, the Klei Shaddai is mekadesh even things which are possible, and that you can go ahead and put it on Mizbeach. My lab should keep up psul and psul, and he spilled it, and they sprinkled it. So there's Lakish, who told you the pshat in the Mishnah is it's an and, maybe it's an or. That loy should keep up psul, inam mishazar psul. Mishnah give me two instances that maybe the Klei Shaddai is not effective, and if it's possible, and therefore when you put inside the Klei Shaddai, you have no right to go be zodik the dam. That's one instance which is no good, and the other instance is where what do you call it? It was Kabbal's dam was all right, and somebody else came along and was later get dam, and that's when it became a problem. Yeah, so there was no raya. Says the Gemara, right? Toshma, no, we don't answer it. Now we have an interesting question. Avir Mizbeach, we had before discussion about the Avir of the Azorah, if it's part of the Azorah. Now we're having a discussion. Avir Mizbeach, let's say the airspace of the Mizbeach is Ki Mizbeach Damiloi. Later the Gemara will conclude we're talking about if it's hanging on a stick or something. But right now the Gemara thinks that you're standing on top of the Mizbeach and your activities are in the air. No, don't do that. There, nobody's holding it, it's flying in the air. Here, you're standing there, and that you're doing malika. Do we say that the even though the bird is in the air, it's as if it's being done on the mizbeach, or do we say that no? But since it's done in the air, our mizbeach is only if it's sitting on the floor of the roof of the top, the gag of mizbeach, not if it's in the air. So the Gemara, shame shahamizbeach mekadesh. Just like the Mizbeach is Mekadesh, Kach, Kevish, Mekadesh. It says, just like the Mizbeach is Mekadesh, so too the ramp is Mekadesh. Now, let's work on the ramp. The Iyamre, that if you're going to tell me, Avim Mizbeach, Lav Kim Mizbeach, Dami, if the Avim of the Mizbeach, if the airspace is not like Mizbeach, so the same thing by the ramp. The airspace, so how can you take things from the ramp, something, let's say we say that the ramp is something that became possibly placed on the ramp, you can leave it there and you can put it to the Mizbeach, because it's the same thing. But how can you? Because the moment you pick it up from the ramp to bring it to the Mizbeach, it's in the Avim. It's as if you took it off. And we learned before that once it took it off, you cannot put it back on. So it must say that the airspace of the ramp has the same din of the ramp, and therefore the airspace of the Mizbeach is the same as Mizbeach. That's what I was trying to say. The Yam Mizbeach, Lav Mizbeach, Avi Mizbeach, Dami, Avi Kevish, Nami, Lav Kevish, Dami, same conclusion. Is Heichi Masi Leme Kevish Mizbeach? How can you bring it up from the Kevish to the Mizbeach? Havale Yodu, the moment you picked it up, as if it left. Someone answers, why? Why did the Noggle lay? You schlepped it across. You dragged it on the ground on the ramp. No Avid over here. But we got a problem. There's a space between the kevish and mizbeach. Now, nowhere did we learn how much space. Before, when we learned it, we said a small space. We didn't learn how much exactly, how big is the gap. So Taisa here brings from Rabbeinu Chaim that the gap was more than an amma. And the reason why the gap had to be more than an amma is because we had the avir karka. The karka is mafsik between the kevish and mizbech. But if it's less than an amma, you have the seiviv. Remember that where the ram goes on top of the mizbech, you go travel down 3 ammas, you have a seiviv sticking out an amma. So that's not karka. That's a seiviv. And the seiviv we learned before, you can do karbanos according to one opinion on the seiviv. So if you have to have avir karka, so you have to have more than an amma. But the truth of the matter is, even more than an amma, you get to the yisaid. But the yisaid, you can't shecht on the yisaid. So it's like karka in that respect. But the yisaid, you can think. So you have to be more than an amma. That's Rabbeinu Chaim. Others learn a lot less than that. It's only a fistful or even less than that.
I say that you have another problem. If you have more than an amma,
you jump.
The whole union of you're not allowed to make psia gasa in the mikvah. The madregs.
I know, but it's an amma psia gasa.
Big step.
Oh, okay. A good question.
My arm was long.
It could be that Rab Chaim learns that the seiva that all the others are shayim learned that the thing is much closer. It was only a fist away, is because they hold that the opinion that the seiviv was you cannot shecht on the seiviv, and therefore that's the karka. When you say karka, it's the seiviv itself. So why is Rab Chaim is the problem is the following. Yeah, so the Gemara. So the chayla there's an avir between the kevish and beach. So the moment you go to that avir, it's no longer on the kevish. So it's like yorud, and then you bring it back to the beach. It becomes aser. So it doesn't help the nager unless you learn that mamish avir. All this avir is considered like mizbeach kevish. So when it answers, Ruve lekevish kekevish, Rubi lemizbeach kemizbeach. No, maybe you dragged it across, but because the gap is not so big, so the limbs are much wider than the gap. So if the majority of the limb is sitting on the kevish, it's considered the kevish. And the gap is a little piece. And then you could bring it to the mizbeach. Well, the majority of the able will be on the mizbeach, so then it's considered like on the mizbeach. And even though the little bit is hanging in the air, let's say Avi Mizbeach is not Avi, or let's say Avi Kevish not Kevish, and the little bit of the air between the gap between the Kevish and the Mizbeach doesn't bother us because we always look at the Roiv. We always look at the Roiv. If you look at Rabbeinu Chayim that learns more than an Amma, then you need to talk about a very big Aver over here. That's a big Aver because a small Aver, it's just an Amma gap. The Roiv will be in that section for a certain period of time. That's you don't have to say that. Or he'll hold that when it comes to Avi, the Seiviv, the Avi, you need a little bit of karka. So therefore he says maybe it was like this. You need more than an Amma. An Amma of that is above the Seiviv. So that's as far as Avi is concerned, to protecting the Avi of the Seiviv protect. You need a little bit of karka. That's his issue. So the little bit of karka could be a finger. So an Amma and a bit. So then it's not a problem. Because only in his way is even less than the others. The others learn a minimum of a fist or a bit more than that. According to him, it might be only a finger, because the rest is over the Seiviv. Anyway, so let's continue Gemara.
Klisharis is considered like a hefsek between the.
No Klisharis, what do you mean?
When they took things up to the Mizbeach, they took it in the Keli. The
Klishar itself is Mekadosh, so it's not hefsek. The Klishar itself just learned is Mekadosh, just like in Mizbeach. It's not a problem. So we're talking about doing a Vorim, no Keli.
You're talking about the airspace is as if it's lying there. So
yeah, but the Klishar is not a problem because wherever it is, it is. We're talking about where a limbs is not in a Keli, just limbs. So the Gemara, no. So Tivshit Meha, let's be Paisha, Had the boy Rabacham. So let's be Paisha. So you're telling me to say that there's maybe Avon is not like Mizbeach, and the only word is you say look at the Rav. So let's use that to resolve a question Ramacham had. Yesh chibula oilin oiloi. He wants to know whether, let's say, you have pieces of carbon sitting on the Mizbeach, but part of it is hanging out over the Mizbeach. Do we say the part that's hanging in that's on the Mizbeach is part of the Mizbeach, the rest that's off the Mizbeach is like cut off? Come on, the Mifsik dummy, or do we say that you go after the Rav? If the Rav is on the Mizbeach, and this is Mechub is good enough. That was his question. So be patient from you because you say go after the Rav. Obviously, I mean, so he answered back. Tiv should be patient. But the Gemara is not saying definitively that the Avram Mizbech is not the Avram. It's saying could be that the Avram Mizbech is not Mizbech. Bothers you, or how do you take from the Kevish Mizbech? They dragged it. But could be Avram Mizbech is Mizbech, then they didn't drag it. So you wouldn't patient anything. What's the most question? Be patient. That's exactly what Rabbi Chum had a question. Which way is it? And we didn't resolve it here. We don't resolve it there. Don't understand. Okay, anyway. He's masculine, Rabbi Barab Chanan. So Rabbi Barab Chanan asked, the Amrit. Oh, let's go back to the discussion about Avim Mizbeach. If you're going to tell me, interesting point. If you're going to tell me that Avim Mizbeach la Mizbeach, then we have a concept of pigul. Pigul is, let's say, chutzas money. I have in mind, I'm going to eat this outside of its time. Or I'm going to do an activity, I'm going to be zaylik the dam tomorrow. Because if I did what I thought, if I did it tomorrow, it'd be possible. Because tomorrow is already nicer. So the holy in Pigul is the machshava is a machshava psula, because if I would have done what my machshava, if I would have carried out my machshava, it would have been possible. So even just thinking it passes already, and even Lepoil you didn't do it, because Lepoil you ate it within this man, it's possible. But if by a oif we learned before, you go Allah kevish, you do the oilus oif on top of the mizbech. So how does it become Pigul? Because if Avim Mizbech is Mizbech, that means holding the bird when you're doing Malika, he's like you're sitting on Mizbech. Even if something is puzzled, the Mizbech protects it. So come tomorrow, I can leave on Mizbech and do whatever your activities you want on Mizbech, because the Mizbech protects it. So where's the Pigul? Pigul is if I would have carried out my Machshava, it would be possible. But there's nothing possible about it because you're in the Avim Mizbech, and the Mizbech is kailated. If you learn that Avir, and we're learning right now that even though you're standing on the Mizbeach, but because you're holding the bird in your hand, it's like Avir. That's how the Gemara, the end will change. But that's what Gemara thinks this whole way. So he's asking a simple question. Like, what do you ask you mean?
No, I'm just thinking, isn't Machsheves Hazman that Milachat Chil was never geshok, never was a carbon that was kosher because it had a Machsheva, let's say it's kosher V'shnei Yom V'Layla Echad. And the Kohen has in mind, B'shas Shchita, he's going to eat it on Yom Shlish.
No.
So Lachat Chil, he shechted it.
Yeah, but you're standing on the Mizbech at the same time is protecting everything that's on top of the Mizbech. If it's Avim Mizbech, which means that if you would have do the Zikah, you could do the Zikah the next day. You could do everything, the things that you need to do, you could do besides sitting on the Mizbech. So the Machshava, even if you would have carried out your Machshava, it wouldn't. It would still be all right. So he said, yes. If the possible machshava by an oilus that you tell me that it's possible by machshava, how is it ever possible? Let's say we talk about chutzlas manoi. We talk about if Avim is bech like a mizbeach, and even if you hold that sitting on the mizbeach and do nothing, let's say it becomes nice, right? Nevertheless, once it's on the mizbeach, you don't take it down. And therefore, you put it on the fire, you leave it there, and you do everything what the Korban is supposed to do. So what's the problem? If you had a machshava, you're going to put it on the mizbeach, be maked on the mizbeach the wrong day. So what? If Avim mizbeach dami, I called him mizbeach. The mizbeach was coiled it, protected it. That's what he's asking. So Zaraya that Avim is. So this one you want to bring a raya that Avim mizbeach. So I don't even understand your question. Surely the Avim Mizbeach must be not like the Avim Mizbeach. It's not like the Mizbeach, and therefore, it's just because you're standing on the Mizbeach, but the bird is in the air, and therefore the Mizbeach is not created, and that's the Machshava Psul. What do you mean? Let's argue that Avim Mizbeach is like the Mizbeach, but still, there is a way of saying that will be possible. We'll see in a minute how. And then if it's possible, then when you have a stam machshava that you're going to do tomorrow, could be, it's in the possible way. And therefore, it's a problem. What do you mean? Going to Amar, he said, I'm going to be moilik the bird. Remember, if something is possible to his beach, once you took it down, you can't put it back up. And this guy thought that there'll be moilik the bird on the mizbech. He will take it down tomorrow. He'll take it out tomorrow. And then he'll put it back up like till and put it on the fire. And that he cannot do. So therefore, the machshava, if he would have carried out his machshava, it would have been a possible activity. Therefore, it's pigul. Therefore, maybe even if he didn't think that explicitly, the stam, we always think the worst. And therefore, we'll say that it's pigul. Because there's a possibility that has the machshava psul. Says this makes sense according to Rav who says that it becomes possible sitting on the mizbech. Remember we just said before, Rav holds that sitting on the mizbech, if it didn't burn it, just sitting on the mizbech, it becomes nicer. So it became possible. He holds that what? That's just sitting on the mizbech, then the lina passes it. Rabba says that what sitting once it's on the mizbech, it doesn't get possible. So even if you had in mind that tomorrow morning I'm going to take it down, it never became possible. Even though it's nicer. In other words, if you were to carry out your machshava thinking up tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to take it on the beach, so what? According to Rabba, never became possible, so you can put it back on. So therefore, again, your machshava, even if you were to carry it out, that I'm going to do something tomorrow, which is done today, is not a problem. There's less the machshavta, there's no machshava pigol. Yes, there is. The Rabbi Nami Mishkach, you're going, for example, Dom, he said, had any molka manasla leader, koidem abu shachar. According to Rabbi, if it sits, the key is Amud Shachar. That's when it switches over to the next day, and if it's beyond this date, it becomes nicer. So Rabbi is a case of a possibility. Of Malika, he's standing on the mizbech, and he decides that 5 minutes before Amud Shachar, I'm going to take it off the mizbech and put it on the floor of the Azorah. So now it became possible. And then I'm going to put it back on. You can't. So if you can't, then you can't put it back on. So there is a case of pigul over here. So there's no proof anymore that the Avir Mizbech and Avir could be the Avir Mizbech is considered the Mizbech, but you had in mind to take it off the Mizbech right before Mudar Shachar. So I have no proof one way or another. Well, I'll let Mudar Shachar. So this is the Gemara says, and he continues. Maybe fakert. Maybe you want to be patient for me that the Avir Mizbech must be not like the Avir. Fakert. I'm going to be patient, maybe. For be the devil's advocate, I'm going to say that Avivech is like Mizbech. How would I say that? Maybe Tifshoy the Avivech Kim Mizbech Dami. I'll prove it to you. But if Sagadatach Avim Mizbech Lav Kim Mizbech Dami, it's not like Mizbech. So what about Chata Sa'oiv Psula? Let's say your Chata Sa'oiv that you Chata Sa'oiv you don't do on top of the Mizbech, but you did. Remember, you can do B'chol Malkum, you can do on top of the Mizbech as well. But Sa'oiv always has to be done on top, and the Chata Sa'oiv done lower. But let's say you did on top of the Mizbech. And you did it Leil Shma. So it's possible. So now, the rule is that if it's on top of the Mizbech, we even learned before by Dam as well. Remember, the Gamliel said that Dam as well. Once it's on the Mizbech, you leave it there, so, which means you continue with the Zrika. You continue doing the zrika because if it's on top of the mizbeach protects it. You continue doing whatever you're doing. So chatas are oipsula, heichi mazim medama. How can you go? You say you continue doing it. I'm going to lose the blood. Continue doing you're doing the hazor. But how can you? The moment you pick up the blood, it's the avir, and it's as if you took it off the mizbeach. And once you took it off, you can't put it back on. How could it be mazah? Unless you can learn that Avim Mizbech is Kim Mizbech Dami. You want to bring it out of Avim Mizbech, not Mizbech. Otherwise, how can you have pigul? I'm going to bring it out of Avim Mizbech. First of all, I brought you Heichetim, so it's possible to have pigul even if you hold that Avim Mizbech is Kim Mizbech. If you had a mind to take it off the Mizbech a minute before Mulu Shachar. And furthermore, I'm going to prove to you that Avim Mizbech is Kim Mizbech, because otherwise, how can you tell me that by a chatas or oif that you leave it on the Mizbech and you continue to be mazah according to Rabbi Gamliel? And some say even according to Rabbi Shua, but according to Gamliel, if it's there and you continue the hazor, how can you? The moment you pick up the blood, you lifted it off. And how can you put it back on? When you're sprinkling on the mizbech, you're putting it back on. But it was possible you did a loy l'shmoi. Unless you can learn that even picking it up is still considered avim mizbech. The moment you pick up the blood, it's as if it took it off the mizbech. That's question number one. Number two, sharp psulim, not a bird. Bird, you're doing a shechta. What about a behemoth? And you put and the blood is in the clay shutters that became tummy or something, right? And it's on the mizbech. It's on the mizbech there. The question is, what do you do with that blood sitting in clay shutters? So the Magmula says you could continue the process in the Mishnah. Dam, the Zevachim, the Magmula says you continue. But how can you? The moment you pick up the clay shutters to sprinkle the blood, you take the blood out of the clay shutters or whatever it is there. Yeah, it's the same problem. Unless you learn that avir is like that, I think. The someone answers back. Not a problem. Who said in the case of the bird inside the behemoth, the magalahu, that you put the bird against, you're not standing, you think you're picking up the blood and you spring it. You put the bird against the wall, you have the clay shutters. Yeah, but that's not what you do by mitzvah. Or you did, or you have the clay shutters. But you do it by and by the clay shutters, you have the clay shutters right there by the wall and you just tilt. You tilt the keli, so that's how you do it. So it never left. Physically, it never left. There's no avid here. So he can't be. First of all, hazor, mitzu. When it comes to the chat of the bird, you have to sprinkle. Not like the other bird, you press it against. That's called hazor. That's mitzu. That's, like you said, pressing against. And regarding the blood that's in the clay shutters of a behemoth, you said you put the keli next to the wall. Hazrika, that's called sprinkling. Shrichi, that's pouring. And v'oid. And furthermore, when it comes to the bird, that's how you sprinkle by putting the bird next to the wall. And when it comes to the keli, the clay that has blood in it, that's how you do zrika. Not at all. So you want to bring a raya that avir is not like the mizbeach. I'm going to bring a raya for catch from the same way of your thinking that avir mizbeach is like the mizbeach. Otherwise, how do you do all these bloods? Come to Ravashi says you guys got it all wrong. Ravashi said, all your rayas are meaningless because you don't understand the question in the first place. Ravashi says, if you're standing on the mizbeach, your feet are on the mizbeach, it's not a question of avir. It's like, we have in Shabbos as well. If you're standing there, like Kita's Gufa, you are the stationary thing. You're standing on the mizbeach, there's no avir here, it's you. What we're talking about here is the Toluna Bekanya. You're holding a stick, and on top of the stick is a bird. And then you did your shchita there. How do we treat that? Is that avir like mizbeach or not? Mai. Take that taka, we don't have an answer. So it's not a question of avir. All your rayas is not a problem because it's not a question of avir because you're holding it. You're standing there holding it. So you're mamish like on the mizbeach. You're on the mizbeach, your feet are on the mizbeach, and you're holding it. So you're all on the mizbeach. It's not with avir. Avir is the case where it's mamish and avir is sitting on the corner. Tomorrow, mitzvah Shem.